So this guy rides with you, and he's on an electric mountain bike,
He doesn't ride. I don't know really. I'm new in town.
right?
Um, I'm very new to the scene here, and there's a racetrack called Longchamp, which is very famous. It's where the fashion brand, from Paris, Longchamp comes from. And there's a beautiful racetrack, like horse racing track, in the
Right.
middle, and just on the outside there's like a ring road, which is nice and smooth, and kind of one lane is completely free from cars. It's shut, so they
Wow.
come the opposite direction. So it's just a bike paradise.
Nice.
Uh, and you've got a really good group of fast riders who are there kind of Tuesdays, Thursdays, and over the weekend. Every day you'll find fast groups, but there's a very organized Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday, Sunday morning pack.
Right.
Um, and there's this dude who I think he's a really nice guy. I think I've been told by everyone he's a really nice guy. But he rocks up on this electric mountain bike, and it's unrestricted. So normally, of course, they have a top speed, but he's got an unrestricted one. You can delimit them, and he just like absolutely canes us. And he sort of maybe knows. I get the vibe he pushes for a couple of people who are very much with him and on his wheel.
Right.
But basically, as anyone who rides will know, that as you go down the line, any surge, any ripple,
Yeah.
and it just annihilates the group.
Like,
So, and we do about 45 kilometers an hour for two hours. So
wow.
it's serious pace.
Yeah.
So as soon as you've got someone taking it to 47, 48, 49 with a little finger,
Yeah.
one guy on the front can maybe hold it behind big fat knobbly mountain bike tires. But as soon as you get one guy who remotely drifts a couple of meters, you can't, it's completely a disproportionate effort to go from 45 to 48 into a headwind
Yeah.
on your own. Like it just doesn't happen. So
It's
it's a
like he should
second.
be out on the road moto pacing those guys, not on your track.
Yeah, but also no one needs a moto pacer. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're not on a velodrome. We're like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Bring a
exactly.
He's brought the biggest gun you've ever seen to a knife fight. And it's so unnecessary.
Yeah.
It's just like I don't get it.
I know when I
But
would ride out here, and I was sort of on the beginning of the riders coming out to where we live, because I've had people say that a guy who used to race for Canada where we live is kind of like Flanders, I guess. I've never been there. I'm taking his word. We have kind of mild hills around us.
yeah,
And so I would, a couple of friends ended up getting bikes and riding with me, and I would try to teach them the etiquette. And we'd have one guy who, when we'd be in our pace line, as soon as he got to the front, he put the hammer down and start. It's like, dude, you know what? We're here to enjoy this and not have to kill ourselves the whole time. But
yeah,
every once in a while, somebody wasn't feeling well, and they'd be dropped off the pack, and it's like, dude, we got to slow down to protect this guy and carry him along with us and help
yeah,
him.
yeah.
So
The general understanding that you're significantly faster rolling in a bunch,
yeah,
even if you all work 10% less.
yeah,
It's just pure ego. If you just sprint after someone if you are riding in a group of 40 riders and you don't have the kind of bandwidth,
yeah,
mental bandwidth to realize, hang on a second, what does everyone else need in this scenario? What are the guys at the back thinking? If we're pushing 500-600 watts,
yeah.
they're obviously going to be out the back. And yeah, in a race, it's a race, it's fair game, but this is training.
Right,
What are you doing?
right.
It's
You know what? I love riding in a pack because Sean and I ride a tandem, and
I know you guys do. It's epic.
we used to ride with the Toronto Tandem Co-op. So it's like insane seeing 10, 12 tandems riding in a double pace line, doing 50 kilometers an hour.
Yeah,
And you know what? We're really trusted each other. We're just like 6 inches apart at the handlebars. And, the women are kind of sitting up, having a conversation. as the pace line goes along, you just get a new conversation going, right? And we're just
Yeah,
flying, and people like watch these tandems go by. Yeah, I loved
it's
riding
like
it.
rolling thunder, the
Yeah.
tandems. There are two guys here who come sometimes arrive on a tandem, and on the downhill they just
Oh,
blow past us.
isn't it crazy? But you know what? On the uphill, you guys smoke them.
Yeah,
It's just like, as you would say, a lorry, right?
yeah, yeah. See you later.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So
Sympathy.
I've got everything all set, so we'll kind of get started. Hey, crew. Welcome back to the Skippy Report. As you've heard, we've been talking about cycling a little more than your leisurely pace with guest Louis Hatchwell, formerly of Great Britain, but now located in Paris, France. And tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you, Louis?
Who am I? It's a very good question. I'm in transition. I was and still am GB captain of a sport called Telemark, which I'm sure anyone listening to this will know. Um, but the last 2 years have been decimated by COVID, and essentially, um, my life's I've had to make some pretty big changes, very exciting changes to best position myself for what's coming next. Um, and so I'm now based in Paris. I'm a London boy, London, UK, born and bred, and who spent the last kind of 6, 7 years full time racing the Telemark World Cup circuit. On the side, balancing uni and then building a personal training business and a mentoring coaching business where I work predominantly with young lads to coach an understanding of success using extreme sport. So that's always been my business back home, and I've used that and very generous support and sponsorship to fund the Telemark skiing racing. But with Brexit and COVID, the future was just very uncertain, and I haven't raced for the past 2 winters. I've missed 2 winters.
Wow.
Since Norway, the winter before last, we were sent home due to COVID, and the season ended. I haven't raced since. I couldn't get out this year. It was unreasonable, unfeasible, really. We applied for elite athlete status from UK Sport, and we were given the go-ahead 5 days before the World Champs.
Right.
There was just, and that's not a criticism of UK Sport. We are understandably, to be honest, at the very bottom of the list.
Yeah, we're the fringe guys.
We're non-Olympic. We are, of all the athletes they have to prioritize, there are Olympic qualifications,
right,
in places like Kazakhstan this year, I think it was. You've got to send all these athletes all over the world. Is Telemark the top of the list or anywhere near it? Absolutely not.
Right.
But it became very clear to me that if I was going to be even in a position to continue pursuing it, I had to remain in some part European.
Right.
So here we are in Paris. So I got myself a talent visa based on international sport, and now it's a new chapter in Paris. And my girlfriend is opening a restaurant here as well, which is super exciting.
So cool. Yeah. And that's Charlotte, right?
Yeah, Charlotte Daly. She's on Rue Mondar. It's Charlie's Crew.
Okay.
And it's a really cool health restaurant concept in Paris, which is kind of famously a place where you ask for your eggs to not be cooked in butter, and they come swimming in butter in the classic French style.
Saucinators.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know, that's like my daughter. She, we cook stuff, and it's like, out comes the HP sauce.
It's just, honestly, France is. It is much better now, but it's way behind on vegetarianism, veganism,
right,
paleo, keto diets, catering for different dietary requirements. You say you're vegetarian, they say, oh, so you can eat fish.
Right.
There really is a lack of education and
Really?
understanding here.
Wow. And they're
Yeah,
at the forefront of culinary science.
I know, but it's so classic that the classic culinary scene here is, it's next to none. It's second to none. It's unbelievable.
Right.
France is unbelievable for haute cuisine, but yeah, on the level of where does a young person go to get a vegan burger, there are very, very few places. It's that kind of, and it's punching in at that level, which
Right.
they do really well.
Right. So the style of restaurant that Charlotte's opening?
Really, really like feel good, light-hearted, um, kind of young, colorful scene. Um, and it's fully catered to keto, paleo, gluten-free, dairy-free, whatever your dietary requirements. You'll go in there and there'll be a chef who understands you and caters to you.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, because
Cool.
Sean, my wife, she's gluten free because she's inherited her mom's rheumatoid arthritis.
Ah,
Yeah, and it's in her hands, so she has to take care of her hands, and it's amazing how little gluten consumption can affect the inflammation in your body.
yeah, it's mad. Charlotte's mum, Andy Daly, she's a nutritionist. So she founded. She's basically known as a sugar doctor on social media.
Oh, okay.
Um, and so a lot of the recipes come from that very nutrition based kind of understanding beginnings.
Yep.
And it's that idea. But it's just good food. You don't have to. I think what's nice about it is it's not shoving it down your throat.
Right.
There's a lot of the health fad that's shoved down your throat,
Yeah.
and it's not that. If you want to go in and have a sloppy burger, you can go in and have a sloppy burger. But you can also go in and get a gluten-free keto meal or
Yep.
whatever your requirement is, and it's just nicely done and a
Yep.
soft approach.
We often serve alternative stuff at our house and not tell people what it is. They have no idea.
Yeah, nobody has any idea until they see packaging, and then they're like they're so judgmental.
Yeah, you know what? Like,
That's
say
funny.
at Thanksgiving and Christmas, at one point we'd have the traditional stuffing, and then Sean was like gluten free. And I have a daughter who's pretty much essentially, without going through all the testing that her doctor said, she went to see a specialist,
Yeah.
and the specialist said, you have done everything I would tell you to do. So just consider yourself celiac.
Yeah.
And anyway, so, at Christmases, we'd have the regular stuffing, and then we'd have the gluten-free stuffing. And then I think it was last year, Sean says, well, what should I do? I said, you know what? Nobody knows what they're eating. Just make it all
Exactly.
gluten-free. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember going to school in Toronto and living at my sister's place because I'm, 100 kilometers east of Toronto. And I'd stay there through the week. And my brother-in-law said he would never eat vegetarian food, but you know what? He ate our vegetarian lasagna. He didn't know.
Where's the meat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's like, do you guys have Wendy's over there?
No, but I know Wendy's.
Oh,
well.
yeah.
I
The
know-
old
I know
lady
it
is
well.
like, where's the beef?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's exactly that. I've kind of accidentally forced my entire family to change how they eat.
Right.
And that came about from a pure, athlete performance standpoint where
Yes.
it became painfully obvious to me when I was at uni playing rugby that
Right.
the beer and the pizza, yeah, we were fit and we were training, but the beer and the pizza and the culture of drinking was absolutely ruining me,
Right.
sort of internally, digestively. And it started, that was 18, 18 years old. This is now 10 years later. It's taken me 10 years to get to a point of being diagnosed with IBS and all these things along the way, seeing nutritionists, and fundamentally none of it mattering
Right.
besides a real trial and error process of working out what is right for you. Because as anyone with IBS, IBD, Crohn's, things like that will know,
Yeah.
your diagnosis means next to nothing. And it's so much about the nutrient timing. It's so much about when and what you eat.
Yes.
And So yes, and I'm like, I'm completely onion free, garlic free, dairy
Okay.
free, gluten free.
Right.
Most people who I would cook for would have no idea.
Yeah. Well, you know what it's like.
There's so many ways of getting flavor and
Yes.
goodness into food.
Yeah. And you know what,
Um,
the importance is the access to fresh food. I've had some conversations with people about we do have food insecurity problems here in Canada, but when I watch American news and talk to people, they call them food deserts, like neighborhoods and inner cities where there is no grocery store, no access
I
to
know.
fruit and vegetables, and then we live out here in the country. We grow our own food, but I also have some friends who have an organic farm, and man, oh man, our girls were young when we bought into what they call a CSA, community supported agriculture. It's a small organic farm, and people buy shares, and every week they get fresh vegetables either delivered or you go pick them up. And our girls may have been 9 or 10 or 11, and they were like, wow, these carrots taste even better than our carrots. It's
Yeah, it's remarkable. I
yeah.
mean, yeah. And there's huge misconceptions. Frozen food generally has a much higher nutritional value
Right.
than fresh food because with each mile you put food through, with each impact, it loses its nutritional quality.
Exactly. We just bought
Um,
a side of beef from a former student of mine, and I'd like to know
I
I'd
saw,
like to know
I
his net
saw.
worth. I'd like to know his net worth, because when he was a kid, when I taught him, he was 12 years old. He was buying cattle, raising them, sending them off to get slaughtered, and then he'd take his money that he would need to buy the next herd the next fall, so he didn't have to worry about them through the winter, and then he'd invest the rest of the money. Anyway, so we bought a side of beef, but we shared it between my two daughters. And my son-in-law says to me, it's really bloody when it thaws. And I was like, well, you have to think about all the steps that have been left out between farm and table.
Yeah.
It's not been such a long time since it was butchered and that sort of stuff, And then there was an inked seal on it, and he says, "What's the blue stuff on here?" I said, "It's either the stamp that tells you when the beef was hung to age, or it's the food inspector stamp." So he's getting closer to where his food comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting
taste?
conversation, and telling him that the meat is more robust in flavor than regular store-bought meat. And this is all grass-fed, growing on an organic farm, that sort of stuff. So, and here in Canada, we're not allowed. You'll see corporations, antibiotic-free or growth hormone-free. We've never ever been allowed to do that to our livestock here in Canada. So it's not about producing, these monsters and on these big industrial farms. Yet we do have industrial farms. And I was out visiting a friend who has an industrial farm, but the animals actually prefer where they are. It's everything on his farm is free choice. When they get milked, robots milk them. When they get fed, they all have chips, either on a collar or in an ear and that sort of stuff. And they have access to go outside, but they have this, I don't know how big this barn is. And they have these, they're called big ass fans. And they're huge. They're huge. They might be like 30 feet in diameter. And the cows actually prefer staying inside where the air is moving. They roll up the sides of the barn, open all the doors. And even in the wintertime, they keep it cool. It's, I think he said, about 5 degrees Celsius. And that's optimal for milk production in cows. So it was just crazy. And, they milk 150 head. They're on 1,600 acres. And he's a genetics farmer. That's where he makes all his money. He's got the second best herd of Holstein cows in Canada, production-wise and that sort of stuff. So he makes his money selling embryos around the world for his cows. Yeah. So
That's
it's
a
kind of
mad
interesting.
way to make your business.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd
Um,
you go to school, university?
what I went to, I started life in the Royal Free Hospital in like the base of Hampstead for anyone who knows London. We lived in West Hampstead, which is
Okay.
a really nice it's a really nice area in North London. Um, my dad's a lawyer and my mum's an interior designer. Um, and we were sent we I don't know we were very lucky. Let's say I got a brother who's 60 months older than me, Harry. Um, and I was very lucky. I was very privileged. I went to a really good school my entire life, from the age of like 3 years old, all the way up to 18. I went to a school called Highgate School. I got an amazing education. Um, and and then I took a year out before going to university, um, in which I did all sorts. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. So I did my basic training in the Israeli army. I did, I did a full winter, basically working in Sainte-Foy-Tarentaise in the French Alps, where I worked in a ski shop and I started telemarking. So that's where that all began.
That was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah, yeah. So I didn't have any form of competitive skiing until I was about 18 years old. By 21, I was captain of the GB team and racing full time on the World Cup.
Wow.
So my life was very, very different up until about 18, 19. It was all football, rugby, British sports, um, and grew up sailing. My dad was a big sailor, so we spent summers on the boat. And then, as much later into our lives, we were, super fortunate, and my parents bought a chalet in Saint-Foy. And so we grew up skiing in Valois, which was the flip side of the Col de Galibier in the
Okay. Yeah.
mountains, just at the base. And and then we moved kind of a couple of valleys over, um, which is quite a long way away, but not really in A to B,
That's like I don't know if you remember if you ever did meet Norm Miller on the U.S. Telemark team.
I think so, maybe.
Yeah,
I think so.
he's older. He would have been like in the Masters and that sort of stuff. Anyways, he and I only live 30 miles apart, but it takes us 5 hours to get
Yeah,
to each other.
exactly. What's in the middle? Yeah. It's quicker with your skins.
Yeah.
Um, no, so we moved to Saint-Foy, kind of in search of bigger skiing,
Right.
and of course that Saint-Foy-Tarentaise is an amazing little hub of powder. It's basically like one of the best powder resorts in the world, let alone Europe. It's a real sort of gem. In amongst, just the end of the road, you've got Tina Val d'Isère. Opposite you, you've got Les Arcs and La Plaine, which are joined by the cable car. And at the base of the valley, you've got Bourg Saint Maurice. And it's kind of, and then just next to you, you've got La Rosière, and you ski over into Italy. So
Okay.
you're in an amazing place.
I think my sister has been there.
It's an awesome place to ski.
Right.
And there's a really high level skiers, and there's also a bit of a telemark culture there.
Cool.
And telemark's a bit like that. You've got places and people who basically spread it and share the love, and you get a localized hub of knowledge and yeah, of telemark really. So a very important man in the story is a man called John Langridge, who I call John Sondra Langridge after the one and only. But he was a beautiful, beautiful skier, telemarker, and he was not a young man when we met him, sort of not old either, but he was sort of upper 50s, I think 60s, and just kicked it with anyone.
Right.
Just a wicked skier and beautifully smooth, and always with a knee down,
Yep.
And it's unusual to meet fast skiers who are British and who are slightly older, who are also lovely. He was a teacher his entire life. He was just one of those men you just wanted him to be a grandpa.
Right.
And I basically tried it because of him. I dug out some old Telemark skis in the basement of the shop I was working in, Ski Set, which was Sandra Amé's ski set in Sainte-Foy. I worked for her. She's a family friend. I dug out, they were K2 Telemarks, cable bindings, Rotafella Cobra bindings, and a pair of crispy, the old duckbill crispy blue and red boots.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like really old. And for about half an hour, I hated it and thought it was the worst thing I've ever done, as I fell on my face continuously.
So were you actually trying Telemark stances and all that sort of stuff?
Straight away.
Oh,
straight
yeah,
away.
yeah.
I was completely self-taught. This is a guy, and people don't really believe me when I say this. When I ski with them now, but I was honestly a very average skier. I was not an American or a Canadian or a Frenchman who'd grown up in the mountains skiing. We were Londoners. I was
Right.
a proper London boy. We spent 2-3 weeks a year max in the mountains skiing with my family. And if there wasn't snow, you didn't ski. You know, it was like,
Right.
you know, my dad's a beautiful classical skier. Mum's a really nice skier. My brother went to Whistler, and that was where the ceiling was blown off, because
Right.
he was sponsored by Planks and just became an absolutely sensational off-piste kind of free ride skier. But my brother is the best athlete I've ever met.
Right.
You know, he is one of those natural thoroughbred racers.
Right.
Whether it's running, football, rugby, he just excelled. And whatever he sees, he can copy and do. He can apply to his body. So he kind of blew the parameters of what was possible on skis open. And it still made no sense to me on Alpine. I could not. Telemarking was the first thing that I could look at, and I saw, hang on a second, everybody's doing this wrong. You know, I met telemarkers who've been telemarking 20 years and their turns were still stiff as hell.
Right.
And they still had no fluidity. I couldn't understand why they were moving that way. And it took me, you know, in 7 days, I felt I made what it took some people a year to learn. It just really clicked with me. It was the first thing in my life that I was like, this I get.
Right.
And I think that was why I went into it so hard, really. I was like, within a month, I'd emailed GB. I just Googled, watched everything, read everything I could. John gave me Telemark Tips, that great book.
Yes.
And that was the start of it. I was, you know, I had an insatiable appetite for it. And it kind of set the direction. And from then on, it became very much all about performance. And I was very fortunate in the sense that we are completely, basically unfunded, unsupported in Britain. And people will hear that and be like, how is that a good thing? But in my position, you've got to remember, I was a half coach. I was a trainer, and I was learning the industry and, wetting my beak, so to speak. And just absorbing. And on the other side, I was trying to become one of the best in the world in a sport that was very small, which allowed you to get very high up in it very early,
Right.
before you really deserve to be there, right? It's very unusual that you can go straight into kind of World Cup in your second season. You know, how many sports in the
Right.
world do you have access to that level?
Yeah.
So that was it. So that it was just straight in at the deep end, and then loads of injuries and loads of gnarliness along the way, and all of which made me a much better coach.
Right.
And out of all of that grew a business of mine back home after the season of mentoring young lads, basically young boys above the age of about 10. Basically, I always felt they needed double figures to have the kind of cognitive development required to understand their own sense of self and position in society and life. But I mean, and I kind of found myself being sent kids who were not necessarily troubled, but going through difficult transitions in their lives. And I felt I was well placed in between parent and child to apply. And all I did was coach sport,
Right.
but with a real mindfulness on how are they developing, how are they thinking, how are they responding in sport and out of sport. Because, that's what I had learned. I had learned that and that was 2 huge injuries, learning to walk again twice, having a nerve removed, exploding my foot, and being told it's never going to be the same. It was all that, which isn't, the details aren't important. What was important was just the work that I was forced to do on myself.
Right.
And I was left in a position where we had built up the GB team. We had done a huge amount. We'd learned how to run a squad. We'd brought in a central coach. We'd basically turned GB Telemark. Myself, along with my teammate Jasmine Taylor and the committee who were there, when I arrived, there was no team, there was no kit. You had to buy your own. There was no coach. There was no bus. We had nothing. And within 5 years, we had a team bus. We had a fully sponsored outfit. We had Dare to Be as a headline clothes sponsor. We had Seb Monsard as central team coach, who I still think is the best coach in the world for getting British people to top 20 in the world.
Right.
Past that, I think it requires very specialized performance coaching, which Telemark still lacks.
Right.
But yeah, that was what we did. And all of that fed into an amazing apprenticeship for life, and for using sport to coach an understanding of suffering and, deliberate suffering and learning. And that's it. That's what it's been ever since.
I like that.
That's what I coach.
How you talk about suffering, because a friend of mine who I interviewed, Adam Sauerwin, I think I mentioned this in a couple of episodes. He went to, he's from Buffalo, not far from me, but he likes to go ski the East Coast, not far from where the World Cup races were. So he'd go to Mount Washington, and on the backside is Tuckerman Ravine, Gulf of Slides, all that sort of stuff. And,
yeah.
He skis here in the East like I do, mountain or hills resorts that are like maybe 800 feet max vert. And, it's a couple hours into the trailhead and then up onto the snowfield. And he was saying there's no correlation to his ability to suffer and his fitness level. He just suffers, but he thinks he's fit,
He suffers well.
Yeah, exactly. And that was like me, people would say, why do you ride all those insane miles? And it's like, because it feels good when you finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get, thoroughly exhausted. And I have a great buddy because he got into cycling when he moved next door to me. And he's a race car driver, or was a race car driver. I would propose these adventures to him. It's like, hey, you want to ride around Lake Ontario? Sure. And up until our first day, which was 140, 50K with a loaded bike, he had only ridden maybe 80 kilometers, with nothing on the bike.
It's a big difference.
Yeah. And then another day I came up with the idea, let's ride to Kingston and back. It's 321 kilometers, right? So left at 5 o'clock in the morning, got home at 7 o'clock at night. And Jeff was, he thought he'd be good if he got to Kingston and then got a ride home. But you know what? He stuck with it and rode the entire way. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing what, I think especially when you've got someone there with you.
Yeah.
They all had you giving them the apprenticeship. It's much easier having that security, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're not suffering alone.
Exactly. It was like this morning, I planned to go for a bike ride and I got up. It was still cold. It was super windy. And it's like, I got to dig out all my winter gear. It's like, I'll go for a walk instead. I'm that guy that, like, say, for example, Sean, she's a swimmer and I swim. I had to take it as part of my university courses in phys ed. But I'm that training buddy. If you need, I told her, I said, I will not wake you up before 7 o'clock in your retirement in the morning. However, we have to get to the pool because it closes at 8:30, and we have to be able to do our lap. So, like, I'm that guy. It's like, if you want to do something, hey, you just say, hey, Keith, you want to do this? It's like, yeah. And I'm the motivator. Okay, let's go. Let's go. Come on, let's go.
In the car, engine running.
Yeah. So
Honking. Yeah.
anyway, so what do you think you're transitioning to? You have any idea?
Yeah, I do. I have found a very natural. I've taken the last month or so to really iron things out. Um, the the skiing is still there, and it always will be there. And I think that's almost the beauty of a seasonal sport. That's the beauty and the curse of it, is you have so much work. There are these sports like skiing, like gymnastics, where they're kind of mystical things that nobody sees until the snow arrives.
Right.
Nobody sees the graft. And yeah, I mean, you're kind of always working towards it in the shadows. And I'm the fittest, I'm in the best shape I've ever been. I can go back and ski if it's right and if it works. I'm still, I'm still GB captain. I'm still in the position I was in, if not a better one, as a smarter, sort of calmer, happier athlete.
Right.
You don't lose the skill. You just have to get the legs under you again. Cycling has played a huge part in my life the last 2 years, and I've gone from pretty average, using it like a lot of athletes use it to spin their legs pre-season, build the base fitness, taking it into full-on online racing, and now here there's a proper community of teams and people down at the circuit pushing proper performance, and that has very much kept me sane. I'm not a very competitive person, which is, I think a lot of people find that hard to believe, but there are two types of athletes I find. There are those who are immensely competitive and just hate losing and want to beat everyone.
Right.
And then there are those who just want to beat themselves and they just want to improve. And both can be immensely powerful. I fall into the latter. I'm not competitive with anyone, but I find it devastating if I don't live up to my potential.
Right.
And I'm a harsh self-critic, self-judge. And the cycling, I just fell into, just like the telemarking all those years ago. The cycling has just replaced it.
Right.
It allowed me to just hammer myself, and I've built my way up on the online side on Zwift Racing. I don't know if you probably have heard of it.
Oh yeah.
For anyone who hasn't heard of Zwift Racing, it's basically plug your bike into a smart trainer or a dumb trainer with some sensors strapped onto it, and you turn your bike into a computer that syncs up to a screen.
Right.
And you can race against all kinds of sort of landscapes and people online, and there's full e-racing, full competitive salaried e-racing teams online.
Really?
Take it as
salaried online racing.
Yeah, it's UCI e-championships now. There's a world championships. There's a rainbow jersey for online cycling. It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
I have a friend who's gotten into cycling since he retired. He's a retired provincial police officer, and I've never actually gone and seen the whole setup. So he took me in his basement, and he'll ride. He did a 6-hour ride. It's like, dude, my nether regions fall asleep after an hour on a trainer. Like, I prefer riding rollers, but it's like, I'm not a big fan of a trainer. And the other thing is, I like being outdoors. So I'm one of those dummies who used to, I commuted by bicycle for almost 30 years, even in the winter, and people are like, "What?"
I know.
So
yeah.
But yeah, that's insane.
It's amazing. So it provided me the kind of the mountains were taken away from me, so to speak.
Yeah.
and it provided me the landscape to just keep flogging myself,
Right.
and just learning. So I did throughout the last year or so, I did a V Everesting, which is, I don't know
Yes.
if you know what that is. It's the
Yep.
height, you ride the height of Everest in a single ride. So, I did Alpe d'Huez 8.6 times back to back,
Wow.
which took me, it was 12 hours riding
That
non-stop,
is
nine
intense. So
9,000
does your
meters.
trainer adjust the tension
Yeah,
oh, that's
yeah.
really.
I have a it only counts if you have your trainer on 100%. So that is identical gradient to what you'd be experiencing on the road.
Oh man.
So it is an identical replication of the Alpe d'Huez road. So it's 15% is 15%.
Wow.
And there's no getting around it. So you put a big cassette on your bike, you
Yeah.
kit up the bike like you would on a normal road. Yeah, and you get into it.
Doing
You know,
Alpe d'Huez 8 times, you're definitely flogging yourself, man.
yeah,
You'd
no,
be like
exactly.
spent at the end of that.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just it's a learning process. I'd never done anything like that. I'd run London Marathon. That was it. I ran London Marathon. Yeah, in my final year of university, I had finals, I had junior world championships, I had the London Marathon, and I had a catastrophic burnout.
Oh, I bet.
And yeah, I was young, dumb, and full of enthusiasm and equal part naivety, and ignorance. And I've had a full-on depressive episode and burnout in my final year uni, and
Right.
learn a lot from that. It was so situational. I was so fortunate. I've always been the kind to identify what's going on in me very quickly.
Yep.
Took myself straight to my GP. Was like, I think something's up. I have no motivation. I don't care. And that was it. I had a burnout and learned a lot from it. Built myself back up. Took some time out. Took a couple of months. Got everything delayed and graduated with the master's students. 6 months later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, lots of things in your life that you forget about until you do something like a podcast.
Yeah.
And
Well, you
this
know
is
what? It's
we thought,
interesting because you know what? I've had the same episode. I was, I always pay attention to my body. And
yeah,
there was one year I was, my birthday's in September. So this was the following February, January, maybe it was January. I wasn't feeling really well. My back was itchy all the time, so I'd be on the door frame at school, like the big old bear rubbing on a tree.
yeah,
And I ended up with shingles. And then as I was recovering from shingles, I got mono. And oh my gosh, having both of those at the same time, I was like, what's going on? I was off work with the shingles, and I was coming home on the train from a friend's place. And about every 20 minutes, I would get like pre-race jitters for no reason at all. I was like, okay, there's something up. Anyway, so
yeah,
all of those things really affected me. I ended up with some mild depression, plus or minus anxiety, I think the doctor said. They put me on happy pills for a year. And when I went back to see him after the first week of taking them, and I was like, yo, dude, I don't know if you put me on the right stuff because I feel worse. And he goes, no, we don't tell you you're going to feel worse. I know it's working when it makes you feel worse. Anyway, so I just took my pills for a year, and I missed 3 months of work recovering from the mono. Oh, my gosh. My day was get up at 11 o'clock in the morning, have a shower, make Sean's lunch because she just works like less than a kilometer from the house. Have lunch with her, go back to bed, get up at 4 p.m., just in time for the girls to come home, get supper going, make sure their homework was all done. And at 4 o'clock, I was ready to start my day. And then 8 o'clock at night, I was back in bed until 11 o'clock the next morning. It was killer. But you know what? It just from paying attention to your body, and that might be Sean being a nurse and my background in phys ed, right, with all the health sciences. Yeah, so kind of kindred spirits there, paying attention to your body, and so many people don't do that.
No, it's amazing. I mean, it is. It's remarkable. I don't know if people don't do it or if the habits people pick up throughout life mean they blindside themselves to it.
Right.
Um, the result is the same, you know, but
Yeah.
I work with so many clients who repeat, um, you know, my bread and butter is physical training.
Right.
But there's no such thing as physical training without a mental aspect.
Yeah.
You know, it's yeah, there's no sport coaching of any form which you can do well without a serious understanding of the mind and the entire relationship between spirit, mind, body.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, anyone who says there is and you can just coach the body is probably not doing a very good job,
No.
because all we're trying to do is get the most out of your athlete, at any level, whether it's a 50-year-old just trying to keep their body ticking over after a desk job or a young developing GB level skier. It,
Right.
it, it, it makes no difference. It's that same, teach people how to be balanced, happy, healthy, and you'll get bloody good athletes as a result. Um,
And you get healthy, happier people in general. You know, you take a look
yeah,
at
for sure, for sure.
a lot of the people who are athletes and where they are, you know, later in life. You know, my involvement in sports and all that sort of stuff is kind of helped me. You know, near the end of my career really did change. I went from being a shop and phys ed teacher to teaching freaking English. It's like I
Yeah.
went and got a phys ed degree so I didn't have to teach English. In the last 10 years of my career, I had to teach English and a few other
That's
things. And it's like, you know what? I just put my head down, bury myself, learn what I need to do, get the job done, and then get out of there, you know?
Yeah, there's your self-fulfilling prophecy for you.
I've had a
There's
few
no
I've
escape.
had a few of
There's
those
no
in my
escape.
life that I can recall. Yeah. Yeah. However, you know what? I actually had a lot of fun, and in my last year, I had some students learn from me and pull off on me what I told them to do in the future. I told them, I said, don't get rid of your work. You're going to need it in the future. This is what I told my girls. You know, got to work smart, right? So as you have assignments that are coming up in the future, you know, it might be, I taught grade 8, so this would have been grade 11, say, or grade 10. Pull out those assignments. They're going to be a base for something. You have already done a fair amount of research. Now you just have to add to it to make it at a more sophisticated level because you're 3 or 4 years older. So near the end of the school year, I'm reading a couple of assignments, and I was like, these sound familiar. So as I was handing the assignments back, I said to this one boy and this one girl, I said, you guys remember when I said don't throw your work out, you can recycle it, add to it, make it more sophisticated? Did you guys do that to me? And they both smiled and they shook their head. I said, that is so good. You learned. That was so perfect. For me, that was, you know, yeah, a good moment in my teaching career.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it brings back to what you asked me before. What are you transitioning to? And it's, where's this going? And to me, that's why I subject myself to an Everesting. That's why I do the marathoning. That's why I choose to kind of deliberately suffer well
Yep.
continuously for two reasons. The first being I identified very early that there are places you can go in yourself and outside in nature and so on and so forth, but fundamentally in yourself, um, where you have clarity and where there is a much better sense of perspective.
Yeah.
Pain is an opener.
Yep.
Because there is no noise. As soon as you are out on the bike for, and you cannot ride for an hour and find the same depth of thought as if you ride for 6.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
The deeper you go into the well, the more of the light, unimportant stuff just floats past you.
That's right.
And I'm not really the kind to sit and imagine the waves rushing over me and think away the distraction. I am more the kind to dig in, go deep, find my medium,
Yeah.
which has been sport, and get rid of the noise my way. Um, And I think that's what it's about, and that's what the cycling has allowed me to do. For years, I was trying to find a way how I could create on a mass scale coaching and inspire people and impact people through sport and through skiing. And this year has taught me that I may still have stuff to learn from skiing, but I personally think cycling and a journey in the next chapter being focused on the bike is going to allow me to impact a much greater number of people.
Right.
And that's kind of where my energy's going. That's where I'm putting my energy. Because skiing's too seasonal. It's too difficult to, the entry is very high.
Yes.
There's a high financial entry. Yeah. There are clear socio-cultural barriers that cycling doesn't have, that loads of other sport. You know, the best example is running. Yeah. Anyone can be given a pair of shoes and run.
Yes.
But it's brutal on the body running. And it's a difficult thing to give people love of because, I don't know, there's something about a bike. I think it's the greatest invention ever. I think it's a pure kind of...
I agree. I read a book where they said it was the most noble invention ever.
Yeah, I just love it. I think it is just man, woman, machine, nature, and you just have access through and there's something great about a mechanical. First of all, cycling is also quite sexy, like a nice bike, nice kit. It's kind of a sexy sport.
Yeah.
And that's on one end of it, and on the other end, it's just as simple as jump on a bike and go for a spin, and it makes you feel better every time.
Do you think, when I was at Teachers College, one of my profs, he wrote a book. He was a outdoor educator, and he wrote a book called A Journey in 6/8 Time, and it was about paddling, and he realized that his strokes were actually in 6/8 time, like in music. And I talked to my prof about this, and about cycling. And you know what? My cadence is kind of like that. And I wonder if it helps peel away the layers and let you to get deeper, because there's that, as I say, a metronomic cadence, you know, to your legs pumping,
it's
right?
Rhythm.
Yeah.
It's rhythm. It's flow. It's anything. You know, it's what, you know, one man's violin is another man's bicycle,
right.
Another man's skis, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, the sound of skins as you climb uphill.
Yeah.
You know, the sound of a gear. For sure, there's an element of that. Like we are much more in tune with life and the world if we allow ourselves to be than we often think.
Right. And being much more in tune, man, when you tour by bicycle, you can't be any more in tune than
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's fantastic. And to me, there's no level that is too low, and there's no ceiling that is too high. As far as that's the way I see it now. There is, you know, I am buzzing. I'm super kind of motivated to create grassroots youth cycling team, racing teams, basically on a real for less privileged inner city kids. It's something that I've been thinking about, and I'm absolutely going to push to try and create. There are some great initiatives in London, kind of put down the knife, pick up the bike.
Right.
But like I've noticed in most of my kind of fields of training, if you get people just to do something for the sake of doing it, it's purposeless. It's aimless.
Oh, you mean like getting a vaccine for COVID? Just because I live north of some country that there seems to be a lot of hesitancy that they have to offer $1 million lottery in the state of Ohio to get a vaccine. It's like, you don't think having your life, surviving?
Are you vaccinated?
I am. Yep. Yeah. I was lucky because Sean is working, and that's what she's doing is COVID stuff. And she says, I have a friend who owns a pharmacy, and she says, hey, I think Scott's got AstraZeneca. So I got on, and nothing was coming up for a couple of days. She says, okay, it's because it hasn't arrived and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I was able to get my vaccine in the first few days that it was available. And for me, you know, science is a big part of my background, and there are risks with everything, but there's far less risks with taking a vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, look, I I won't be vaccinated until I'm told. I had COVID. I got it quite badly um, in London, and to me, after I'd had it, there wasn't much point in getting a vaccine
Right.
unless it really opened the borders of international travel.
Right.
But that's about as firmly as my stance is on it. Um, as soon as it's required for global travel, I'll be in the queue.
Right.
I just think there's a lot of people who need it more than me.
Well,
And
yeah, so, I didn't jump the queue or anything. It was just offered, and I went
yeah,
and got it,
no,
and yeah.
no. If you agree with it and you want it done, it's more power to the fact that you live somewhere where you've actually got vaccines available,
Right.
and can protect yourself as best as possible.
Yeah.
It's a privileged thing, but I'm in France now, and it's a very interesting mindset here.
Is it?
Because there are a lot less they're essentially a lot less for it, I would say, in general. Put it simply, they've had vaccines and people aren't showing up,
Right.
and they're not interested. I think the French are quite, in a funny way, they're quite sort of naturopathic, homeopathic.
Right.
They're not very trusting of science. They're quite traditional, and there is definitely resistance to it here.
Right.
I just think it's so interesting. I don't think there's a right and a wrong. I just think there's real cultural intricacies.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I'm reading this book called Think Again. It's pretty interesting, and listening to people for and against it. And I was just listening to Dr. Fauci talk this morning. Yeah, I think it was this morning. You know what? And he must have read this book, or that this is the way that he's been educated, that he doesn't judge anybody. He just educates. And you know what? He's fine with the choice with which you make. Just you realize that, there could be really bad circumstances a little later on, and
Sure.
people may not be able to help you.
No, I think my issue with the vaccine has nothing to do with the vaccine, but actually the way certain governments, the British government included in that, to be honest, have essentially media blackout anyone speaking against the vaccine.
Really?
And I don't think that I mean, I know it's not isolated to Britain.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got platforms like Facebook which are pulling down advice from nutritionists because it goes against the essentially the government guidelines to go and get vaccinated.
Right.
They don't want to see people saying, you can treat this yourself with vitamin C and quercetin and things like that. There are other means, but I don't know. I do understand it as well, because it's kind of a time of war.
Yeah.
And it's kind of when there is a epidemic like that, or pandemic, you kind of need one voice.
Yeah.
And even if that voice is wrong, sometimes it serves everyone better sometimes to follow the wrong advice altogether than it does to serve, the right advice, but with a fractured society.
Yeah. You know what? We've been very fortunate here in Canada, because every level of government has been on the same page.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. And you know what? Even, our conservatives and our liberals, I got to ask you, because I like to learn stuff. So you guys have your Labour Party and your Conservative Party. Do you guys have like liberals in Britain?
Yeah,
or whatever they're called.
Lib Dems. You've got Lib Dems.
All right. Okay.
Democrats. You've got Green. Yeah. You've
okay.
Got,
UKIP,
who are the really terrible UK Independence Party, who are very, very happy with Brexit and don't really like brown people and everything in between.
That's like some of our provinces that have threatened to leave Canada. I was like, fine, like one province. That's why we came to Ontario, or as I say, we moved to Upper Canada. Because my dad wasn't fluently French and wanted to open his own business. And I'm a bad man. It's like, okay, you want to leave? Leave. But you're not getting anything from us. You got to give us the army that you have. Give it back to us. you know. And then in the West, we have a province of like a bunch of Western cowboys, you know. It's however they seem to be asking for help, and I was like, yeah, don't you remember back in the 70s when there was the fuel shortage, and it's like, yeah, let the East freeze. It's like, come on. Yeah, I'm a bad man. I have a really good long memory.
Yeah. I can see. That's why you do this.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I do it because I love to learn. Because you know what? Like I'll watch the news and that sort of stuff, and I see Parliament in Great Britain, and I was like, do they have liberals there? Like, what are they called there? You know? So
Absolutely. But we honestly, we're so middle.
right.
Like even the right and the left are both, you know, they're both pretty bloody conservative nowadays.
Right.
Like it is. There's not that much. It's a you know, London and Britain is it's a very advanced part of the global kind of, you know, sphere, isn't it? So it's I think the further you go into development, the less extreme things become on the right and the left, it seems.
Right.
At least in a metropolitan sense.
Right.
You kind of, you know, well, I think a lot has changed. I think it's generally softer across the board, even on the far edges of it.
Right. Now, your healthcare, it's probably all similar to ours, that you don't have to go out and purchase healthcare, and it's all part of the state.
You don't. Yeah, and there are some things that, you know, like anything, elements of it have been privatized, and there's a lot of things I don't understand and
Right.
won't even begin to talk about. But in general, having used the NHS my whole life for anything short of big operations and things through sport, and I was fortunate enough to always have private medical insurance as well.
Yeah.
If you have things like, in general, my understanding, if you have serious things like cancer and serious diseases and illnesses, I think the NHS is pretty spectacular. And I think that is not necessarily down to the NHS. I think this is the misconception. I think our doctors and nurses are unbelievable. I think we are immensely privileged to have a national health service in Britain that is as strong as it is. And that's, like any team, basically down to the individuals. And even with shoddy management, I think you can go a very long way if you've got really well qualified and well positioned people underneath it.
Right. And you know what? That really shows up during this health situation.
yeah.
That, like, you know what? You want to talk about those people who have mental fortitude? It's those doctors and nurses that are still going to work every single day, you know, and
have had COVID 4 times because they're so exposed to it. And you know, one of my good mates growing up with his brother's frontline, you know, he had been sent home 3 times for being positive with COVID 3 times. It's like, it's madness. It's madness.
Yeah.
That's why the NHS is unbelievable. And there's a lot of nonsense and a lot of media and a lot of the usual kind of negative.
Right.
I can't stand modern media, if I'm completely honest with you.
Yeah.
It's just a disgrace. And in Britain, we're such a moany country sometimes. I don't know why. I don't know why they're so pessimistic and negative. Sometimes I watch like the Australian news and the Canadian news, and I just think you're so positive.
Well, you know, I think that it might have something to do with your climate, maybe.
Yeah,
but that's stereotyping British climate.
I've moved south.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
South.
I know. However, like, you know what, when I used to teach science and I teach about water systems and that sort of stuff, when I talk about the Gulf Stream and like where London is in Canada, in Ontario, that's a little tiny town called Timmins, which is a logging mining place. That gets insane amount of snow. It'll be minus 30 degrees Celsius most of the time through the winter. And it's at the same latitude as London, you know?
Yeah. crazy.
And you can't go anywhere without winter tires up there. You know, so it's yeah. Maybe it's the seasonal affective disorder.
I don't know what it is. All I can tell you is the weather in Paris is significantly better than London,
Nice, nice.
which is great.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I want to thank you for spending an hour and a bit with me. I was thinking that maybe we'd talk a little more telemark, but I liked how this conversation went. It was really cool. You know what? What's really cool is the last podcast I had was with Corey Snyder of the U.S. And we were talking about sports science and biomechanics. So here we are today. We're talking about health and nutrition and, you know, mental wellness, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
And how sports can have a definite impact on how you're feeling. And if there are any listeners out there who have been shut in your apartments and, you know, need to get out and exercise and eat better food, and you'll feel somewhat better.
Absolutely. Or you can go the other way and you can buy yourself a turbo trainer, and you can plug into the dark world of Zwift.
Yeah.
You can ride the height of Everest in a single ride, crying to
yourself. Wait till I tell my friend. I'm going to challenge him to do that. Because he had done I think he had done a 3-hour ride, and I dropped something off at his house, and it was kind of crappy out. And I said, "So what are your plans this afternoon?" "Oh, I might get back on my trainer." I was like, "Are you crazy?"
No, it's addictive. It's the same. Look, it's the same highs. It's the same endorphins. It's the same magic as outdoors. Which becomes harder and harder to justify in a normal world, right? But when you've got something like COVID going on,
yeah,
and if you can retain perspective, the miracle that is the opportunity to continue training at that level, thanks to modern technology, that should be enough to get you on the bike and keeping yourself happy and healthy.
And you know what? Doing things like we're doing on Zoom, like Absolutely. The technology that we have to do this, you know, it's
Absolutely. Just profiting.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let you go. Thanks for doing this, Louis. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to. You know what? Where can people find you on social media?
So at Louis Hatchwell. So it's at Louis. I get called all things from all different people, but Louis Hatchwell's as it sounds, Hatchwell. I've got a website as well where I have some blogs and some information about myself and about, you know, other things, more general things. Instagram's kind of my big platform, but there is lots more to come. It's and we'll speak. And should there be a platform being built by me in the near future, I'll make sure that people can access it.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, for sure. And Charlotte's.
Charlotte is Charlie's, so it's, you know, CHARLIS, so Charlie's Crew, and they are Instagram, Charlie's Daily Life and Charlie's Crew. That's the restaurant, and you'll see us and our little. You'll laugh at this, but we've just got a new little tiny white Chihuahua.
I call those accessories.
Yeah, that's the one. But this dog is so funny. He has so much character. His name is Squish Milo Daily. He is on Instagram as well as the Parisian Chi. And I'll leave you with an entertaining thought. He is called Squish because in France, as you do, how French is this? Each year, the pedigree dogs have to be named a certain letter of the alphabet. All of the dogs. And so this year was an S, and because we didn't really want a dog called S, so we thought we'd mess with them a bit, and we chose a second letter that the French cannot pronounce. And what's the one letter the French can't pronounce? It's a Q.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we named the dog Squish.
Right.
Just because for those magical moments when we take him to the vet and the vet has to call out Squeeze or however he or she would like to pronounce it. So we gave our dog a stupid name just to mess with the vet.
Well, that was like my cousin. He had a yellow lab, and
Yeah.
his name was Shaw, SHAW. But he lived in Quebec, and all the francophone would
Yeah.
say, "Why'd you call your dog Cat?"
Really?
Yeah, because Shaw is cat, right, in French?
Uh,
Yeah, so
yeah.
yeah, it was too funny.
It depends on the pronunciation.
For sure, for
But
sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
clearly.
All right, well, you take it easy and
You too, man.
have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you so much, Louis, for sitting down and talking with me during this episode of the Skippy Report. And thank you for you listeners for choosing to listen. Anyways, I hope you learned a few things about health, nutrition, physical activity. And don't forget to check us out on Spotify, YouTube. Where else am I? Here on Podbean. And check back in about 10 days for another episode of the Skippy Report.